Now to the next story, which is going to be a little bit more drama, a little bit more controversy in the sense of, for one person's life, not necessarily ours. But we're going to talk about Neil Gaiman again. Because it has been reported that Darkhorse Comics drops Neil Gaiman, cancels upcoming releases following abuse allegations. Now, you know what's a bummer about this? Is I don't actually think Anansi Boys was being written by Neil Gaiman. I'm pretty positive Anansi Boys was being written by another creator, which means that is an IP that Neil Gaiman started, but now other people are basically losing their jobs because of Neil Gaiman's actions. But we'll read the article, and I really want to have a conversation because if Darkhorse is dropping Neil Gaiman, what does that mean for the IP that he has dealt with when it comes to DC? Darkhorse Comics will no longer publish the comic adaptations of Neil Gaiman's works, including the author's Anansi Boys series. The publishing house cited the recent allegations of sexual abuse against Neil Gaiman as their reason behind the decision on Friday. New York Magazine published a cover story earlier this month detailing the new claims of sexual assault and abuse from 8 women. The report came several months after the July 2024 podcast Master, which reported that's a funny name for the podcast if you know what he was telling the women to call him, which reported on earlier graphic accusations by 5 women, 4 of which were among those cited by New York Magazine. And so it kind of goes into the thing, but Darkhorse's Anansi Boys comic series was based on Gaiman's novels of the same name. Amazon is also in production on a TV adaptation of the book, with Whoopi Goldberg part of the cast, which is still scheduled for release later this year. Season 2 of Netflix's Sandman, another adaptation of Gaiman's work, is also still in production. The Hollywood Reporter reached out to Netflix for comment. Prime Video's Good Omens Season 3 will end with a 90-minute episode in which Gaiman is not involved, and Disney paused production on its film adaptation of The Graveyard Book. So basically, nothing is going right for Neil Gaiman. Nothing is going right for Neil Gaiman. Everything that could go wrong for Neil Gaiman is going wrong, and everything that could go wrong for these studios is going wrong for these studios because they, made their bed with Neil Gaiman. But the question I have is, what does this do, not only for the rest of those IPs, for the things that people are already making? Do you continue to do those things? With contracts, you still have to pay him. He owns the rights to a lot of these IPs. Do you still pay him? Do you follow through? Do you just cancel and just say, you know what, we're writing off on taxes? Here's the brutal reality. The brutal reality is if you make a good show, I think the reality is that some people will care. Some people will not watch something or partake in something because they know the person who originally made it is not a good person. Okay? There are people out there that are that. But the rest of the people either are not going to know or are not going to care. And that's just reality. There's either people that are not going to know or they're not going to care. And so the question is, do these studios feel like they can get away with putting out these properties that are beloved by a lot of people and hope that people still watch it without, them getting a bunch of backlash for still putting out these properties and still encouraging people to go and watch it? Or do they just stop now and claim their tax write-offs and, but it's a bummer because he could be ruining a lot of people's livelihoods. Let's just be honest. Production teams, actors, directors, other writers are basically losing opportunities based off of what he has done. Which now wants me to transfer over to DC. And this is something I had brought up in my video where I was really kind of talking about the morality of what he's done. Not really here now to do that. But we did have a conversation about asking the question of what happens to these characters that DC have the rights to when it comes to the properties that Neil Gaiman has worked on for DC. Like, for example, The Endless. I was curious about, who has the rights to what. He wrote Sandman through the Vertigo line. And so there is some sort of ownership with those characters if he wants there to be. But from everything I've kind of understood, I'm still a little confused. And so if someone has a better understanding of this, please jump in the comments, jump in the chat, and let me know if you're still, if you come on to the show as I'm, still live. And let me know, because I do believe that basically the way the contract works is that out of politeness, they will talk to Neil Gaiman and they will say, hey, we want to use these characters for this moment, for this thing. Are you okay with that? And he can either say yes or no, and they usually will respect it. And I think he's allowed to do what he kind of wants to do with the characters. That's why the Sandman show on Netflix, they don't use John Constantine at all. They use Jenny, and they just kind of reuse her, the ancestor of John Constantine. They use her for the present and the past. But they don't have any affiliation with the DC comic version of the story. And so I'm still a little confused on this, but from my understanding, DC can do whatever they want to do with those characters. That the asking Neil Gaiman is just more of a respect thing and trying to stay in the good graces of Neil Gaiman. And maybe that helps, because that means whenever those characters show up, it matters. It feels really important. But maybe it's not as important as it really, used to be now because of all these controversies. And maybe DC needs to just go ahead and use those characters how they want to use them. And I think that's the best way to handle it. I think that the Endless are too cool of DC characters to just throw away and act like they don't exist. I think that world of the Lucifer character, the Endless, all these different characters, I think it's too cool of a world that they have set up for DC to just let it go. Now, I do think they don't need to be overused, but I don't think DC should be afraid of using them. But I think now at this point, they don't need to have any conversations about it with Neil Gaiman. With contract-wise, I don't believe they need to have any future conversations with Neil Gaiman about how they should or shouldn't use those characters. And I think that's the best approach. Is just no longer have to have conversations with him. Just do what you want to do with those characters. And make some cool stories with the characters as you see fit and when you see fit. But that's just me. Let me know what you think. Do you think that the Endless should end? Or do you think they should continue to live on in DC stories in the future? But maybe DC doesn't really need to have any conversations with Neil Gaiman going, for, in the future. I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Hey guys, thanks for watching a short clip from a much longer show that we've been doing on this channel. If you would like to see the full show, just go down the description and click the link. Thanks guys.